Paul Nobles from ETPerform.com. I am sitting here with April Blackford. April is in sunny, warm North Carolina, and I am in frigid, cold Minnesota. So, April, if you want to say hi, that would be awesome.
Hi, everybody.
So we did talk to people in the class. We're going to try and get everybody's questions answered, but we're going to try and hold to 1 hour today because I actually have to go to Apple Store and get my cracked iPhone fixed. So if everybody could come up with questions early on, that would be a great thing. April, any word on your cut? Are you still hanging in there, or how are things going for you?
Well, I really have a hard time with dieting, but I must say that with me reducing my workouts down a little bit and adding the little bit of speed rope in, I'm actually down almost 5 pounds. But I really have a hard time dieting, and I really have a hard time giving up my carbs. So, what about you?
Actually, I've been pretty strict. You know, the way that I work, April, is I pretty much, if I'm going to talk to people about it, I do it, right? And so I don't know. I don't have any problem with like sticking to a plan. My plan's not particularly restrictive. You know, I think I weighed in at 183 when I came back from Cancun. I'm at my lowest right now, which is since I started this, which was 174, and ultimately I'm trying to get to 170. And you know, I still have. I started on January 5th, and it's not even February 5th here, so I feel good. The 183 though is kind of deceptive. I really kind of feel like I was more 180. You know, because you know you kind of deal with a little inflammation and bloating and a little bit of, you know, on vacation you kind of eat a little bit more freely. So I was probably more closely to the 179, 180. So I'm definitely down 5 to 6 pounds, and good. You know, it's one of the things that I don't think people realize is that when you get too restrictive too quickly, or if, for instance, you go low carb, you'll get that big flush of water, right? And so you'll end up, you know, going to the bathroom all the time. But that's not really, that doesn't always equate to fat loss. Fat loss tends to be a little bit more gradual than that, and so that's been kind of interesting. Well, one thing that is interesting is my wife is also doing it with me, and she has seen much wider fluctuations. But I've sort of stuck to the calorie wave method. Like as an example, today is my low-calorie day, and so you know, usually not fun. I have noticed that on these types of days I struggle with sleep a little bit. And so I'm going to try melatonin tonight to see if I can kind of head things off at the pass. But honestly, it hasn't really been super hard. And even on the nights, for instance, you know, when I say I struggle with sleep, I normally get 8 to 8.5 hours sleep. And on those nights, I might get 6 to 7 hours sleep. But I don't feel tired. I don't feel like, you know, like I was deprived an hour and a half of sleep. I think it was just, you know, that's when I was supposed to wake up. But what it does kind of highlight is that when you eat an adequate amount of food, you end up sleeping better. And certainly yesterday after the Super Bowl and having a good amount of food, I slept really good. And so we do have a couple questions, and since both of us are kind of on a time crunch, I want to kind of just jump into it. Let's see. Andy was asking, after figuring out your macros, would you change these numbers as your weight changes, for instance, if you're losing weight or even wanting to gain weight? Certainly you would want to always be adjusting what your scenario is. But the thing that I think that people sort of need to understand is that the reason why we have a coaching forum is you're sort of trying to hit a moving target, and you have to constantly make adjustments. and some of the things that will get you success at one point will kind of slow down your success later on. And people see this often when they do something like low carb dieting, where like I just said, you flush all that water out of your system, and it's like real slow going. What we typically try to do is get people to a point where they have a little bit more flexibility, where they're not just kind of pulling all that water out of their muscle, and so their workouts tend to be a little bit more favorable, and then take a slower approach. If you were, as an example, trying to gain weight, one of the places that I typically have people start is just kind of do the calculator at the weight that you want to be at, and then gradually work towards getting those macros in. One of the problems that people run into, we see this on the page a lot, where people ask this question and they go, well, MyFitnessPal is saying I should be at 1,150 calories, but the calculator and the moderators at ETP are saying that I need to be at 2,200 calories. Who's right? Well, when you do a calculation from MyFitnessPal, or really any calculator on the internet, it's just going off the calculations that you're giving it, right? And so if you have been dieting for a long period of time, what we're trying to do is get you to know what it's like to eat an appropriate amount of food for your energy, and kind of start at a higher number. If you've been eating, let's say, 1,500 calories, and then MyFitnessPal tells you 1,100 calories, but you CrossFit 5 days a week, what you're going to find is you're going to be just like a cortisol cocktail. And so you try to find a happy medium there, and ultimately, MyFitnessPal, they're basing it all off of numbers, and not always off of the experience that we have working with active people, and so that's sort of the difference there.
I think a lot of times MyFitnessPal will actually spit out those numbers based off of the time frame that people put in it as well. So sometimes they put in unrealistic goals of, I want to lose, how much weight do you want to lose? I want to lose 10 pounds, or what's the time frame of this? Oh, 8 weeks. So automatically they're going to spit out, eat 1,200 calories if you want to lose.
I mean, you actually gave a scenario that would be a doable scenario. What most people say is, I want to lose 30 pounds in 2 months. That's what really happens, and then that's when MyFitnessPal gives them a bad number. But MyFitnessPal is not basing it off of true activity levels, or the Catch-McCardle formula, or some of the more advanced scientific numbers that we tend to use with our calculations. And so that's where you start to run into a problem. But Andy did post a follow-up that I think is kind of interesting. He said, always based on your body weight to adjust the numbers. That is incorrect. It's always based on the amount of lean mass you have to adjust the numbers. So if, as an example, you're coming from a restricted background, and then we put some carbohydrates in your diet, we put an adequate amount of protein in your diet, and you gain 10 pounds of muscle, which is not uncommon in a very short period of time, you're going to want to adjust your numbers up, because almost in any scenario, because you have more muscle to work with, and therefore your metabolism is going to flourish under that scenario, and everything becomes a little bit more favorable, which is why, I wish I could kind of explain it, but like when you are, I'll just kind of try to do it, like when you're eating to perform, okay, so you go in 6 months, what you want to do is you want your work capacity to gradually move up this way, right? And so let's say you get your calories working 3 to 6 months in, you decide to do a fat loss challenge, and then you're going to kind of, it's going to look like this. It's going to step down, right? And so over the course of maybe 8 weeks, you might lose 8 pounds, but you're going to see with the scale is that it's going to gradually move down rather than these big boom, which a lot of people are like, oh, wow, that's great. I lost 5 pounds in 2 weeks. Yeah, but you really, all you did was kind of address sort of water and hydration levels. And so if we can have more of this slow work capacity approach, right, where your weight is relatively stable, it makes the numbers better, gives you more muscle, and then ultimately makes this step process a lot easier. I hope that helps, Andy. We're starting to get a lot of questions, and we actually have a really big class today, so I'm going to try and kind of run through some of these. Do you have any thoughts on what I'm saying? Like was that description how you would describe it, April?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. You build your work capacity up, and then at that point, then you focus on fat loss goals, and it should gradually reduce back down. Um, just to touch on his original, is personal, dependent upon, each person is different, and each individual has different needs, which is why the coaches in the forum address each person's background, address the goals from there. Because not everybody wants to lose, not everybody wants to gain. Some people need to try to maintain for a period of time to get their standpoint up, and then work towards one specific goal.
Yeah, because once you have a decent amount of calories to work with, then you don't have to you don't get diminishing returns, right? So if you work your work capacity up to say 2,500 calories over a 6-month period, now all of a sudden when we cut, the worst you're going to be cutting is say 1,500 calories, right? And so that's the basic idea. Andy did have one follow-up, and then I'm going to kind of move on to the next one. Yeah, I just find it tough to adjust numbers sometimes in the situation, but I understand what you're saying. Um, I actually don't think that the majority of the time your numbers do need to be adjusted, though. I think the only time where they would be adjusted would be when you're cutting and when you are establishing maintenance, right? So to give you as an example, in my scenario, I am cutting based off of about 2,500 to 2,700 calories, so my number's lower than 2,500 as an average, and then I have my active rest days and then my rest days, which get me to an average of about 1,900 calories. And so in general, we talked about this last week, so if you weren't here last week, this is an important one. In general, I put my goals at 170, right? But you're always guessing a little bit, right, April? I mean, this is not perfect science. So the thing that I was saying last week is that your goal should be weeks, not pounds. And the reason why I say that is you want to find an end. And that's the mistake that everybody makes. And that's the thing that Eat to Perform is introducing to people that really no one else is talking about. Is most people go, I need to get to 165, right? And or I need to lose 20 pounds because they do the math and they go, well, I would look great at 8% body fat. But the problem is that to lose 20 pounds and get to 165 pounds, you're going to have to restrict yourself extremely. And so what I suggest is that you actually work off of a date or work off of weeks. And so you might have like a goal, like in my instance 170, but on March 5th and potentially March 19th, I do have kind of like a fudge window, right? If I'm like kind of close, I will extend it to March 15th. But in general, I'm trying to finish around March 5th. But let's say that it starts to get really hard, and it's March 5th, and I'm 172 pounds. I'm just going to stop because I don't necessarily know that I might have gained muscle in that scenario. There's lots of factors that go on, but realistically, mentally, I think it's a lot easier to work off of a finite date than it is off of pounds, because you could drive yourself crazy with the pounds. But if you say, well, I can honestly say to you guys that I have not veered off my plan one bit, and that's because I have a date of March 5th. And so I go, on March 5th, that's when I'll start gradually moving things up. So kind of going off of what Andy's saying there, on March 5th, I'm going to start weekly adding in 200 calories. And my goal is to um, push that top end as much as I can, and I'll probably land somewhere between 2,700 calories and 3,000 calories. But here's the key, and this is the kicker, and it's huge. And I'm already seeing it, and it's only going to get better. A lot of the reps, a lot of the body weight movements, all are a lot easier. And so when you're doing something like CrossFit or something like weightlifting or slow circuits, things of this nature, and you're able to convert energy, convert your nutrition to energy quickly. That's part of what happens when you're at a lower weight. You're going to be able to put out more work, and so that's one of the things that makes being a lower weight favorable, and one of the advantages that lean people have over people that are carrying a little bit more fat. And so I've certainly seen some advantages, and I'm not even eating an adequate amount of food yet. I mean, imagine what's going to happen if I get to 170 and I'm eating 3,000 calories. Imagine what I'll be able to do at the gym at that point. And so that's really the goal. So I hope that describes it. April.
I agree. I wanted to touch on what you were saying about the date, setting a goal date rather than an actual body weight goal, because I think a lot of people get kind of caught up in the mentality of I want to reach this weight, and before you know it, 5 months have passed. They've basically dieted throughout the week, undiet on the weekends. They're still trying to chase that body weight that they want to get to, and they've freaking dieted for 5-6 months. And they're just basically a vicious cycle rather than, like what you said, setting a date, being strict, being, on point during that time frame, and then in the end, reverse dieting out and going more towards a performance-based, goal.
Really pushing that top end, really trying to get in, more food. What I was talking about, the conversion of energy, the reason why I stumbled over it is because the discussion of ATP is sort of complicated. It's what, it's the reason that you would take creatine, because creatine helps the chemical reaction that converts energy into work. And so that's why I stumbled over that question a little bit. We went over it a million different ways and sort of more in depth than you probably wanted, Andy, but I hope that sort of helps the answer to your question, because it really isn't a finite number, right? You're just trying to get the best case scenario, and especially when you are trying to expand your work capacity. What you'd like to do is sort of not really gain a whole lot of weight, but having enough food for energy for your work where your weight is relatively stable. I mean, if you gain 3 to 5 pounds, guys don't really typically mind that all that much. The women like to stay a little bit less than that. But even if you're a female and you gain, let's say, 3 to 4 pounds, but you go from, let's say, eating 1,800 calories to 2,600 calories, how easy is it going to be when you go after a little fat loss and you can actually cut at the amount of calories that you were eating before? So anyway, I hope that that's helpful. Andy says it was, so let's move on to Sharon's question. Sharon is saying, what is happening with the body when performance is increased but body fat percentage is the same? April, did you want to take this one? Because I think that I have some opinions, but I'd be interested in hearing what you say, because, one, as somebody who works in our coaching program and deals with a lot of women, it'd be interesting to hear your perspective.
I would basically say, depending upon where they were coming from, if they're coming from a lower calorie background, obviously adding in some energy is going to increase their performance. If they have been at a higher calorie standpoint, or reached the calorie standpoint, and their weight is maintaining, but they're consistently getting stronger, I think in some cases, if the measurements are going down, that would be an indicator that they're adding new tissue. Obviously not always the case, but if they're pretty steadily maintaining weight, I would probably gauge that they are adding some new muscle mass, would be my opinion. Depending upon...
She's saying she's not. I'd be interested to hear from her what she's basing that off of. So I'm assuming that she's still around. She was actually one of the first questions. So I'd be interested to know why she thinks that she's not gaining um, new tissue, because a lot of people will think, well, I'm not really adding new tissue because I don't look leaner in the mirror, but the mirror is not always the best indicator in that regard. Um, but okay, so she's saying coming from a higher calorie. She's saying BKRD. Do you know what
I think
DEXA scan? Okay, from a higher calorie background. Okay. Well, let me give you my perspective on it. Can you do me a favor, though, Sharon? Can you give me some examples of what your macros are, and then give me your height, weight, and age, and then that'll give me some perspective on answering the question. So while Sharon's getting that information, I'm going to kind of try and uh, multitask here. So I'm going to go off of Cynthia's question. Okay, so here we go. Sharon is saying age 40, she's 5'4", 2,100 calories. That's not a lot. I went up 2 pounds of fat and lost 2.5, and lost 2.5 lean based on BIA, no carbs with breakfast and lunch. Let's see, 155 pounds. It would seem to me, well, I'm trying to understand what it's saying there.
I'm curious to know what her training looked like, because if her performance was increasing, if she had accurate DEXA scans, if it was the same facility and she had the same testing before and after, and she gained body fat.
I think I might have gotten too confused here. Let's see, coming from a high calorie background, DEXA scan not changing, age 5'4". Okay, I think I understand what's happening. Okay, so basically what she's saying is she's 5'4", she's 40 years old, she weighs 155 pounds, and she's eating 2,100 calories, but nothing's changing. Well, that sort of makes sense, because it's suggesting that, one, your work capacity is not high enough to justify a higher calorie point and then potentially build some tissue as a result. Okay, but what it's also saying to you is that for you to lose fat, you might have to be a little bit more aggressive. And I think that this is sort of hard to grasp for some people, because, you know, on the one hand, they go, well, gosh, 2,100 seems pretty aggressive for what I do and things of this nature. But, you know, what I talked about earlier in the way that we set up something with like the calorie wave method, you know, if you're sitting at a 2,100 calorie average, that might not be enough to build new tissue, but it's certainly telling you that 2,100 is pretty close to where your maintenance is. Now, does that mean that 2,100 is where your maintenance will be 2 years from now? No, that's sort of what we talked about with Andy a little bit earlier. What you're really trying to do is get that 2,100 number up, right? So you're kind of sitting in no man's land, if that makes sense, Sharon. You're working out better. Maybe your work capacity is better, and you're feeling more comfortable in workouts. You're not eating an extreme amount of food like you were, okay, but you're not really seeing the fat loss that, you know, you want to. I can say for my wife, as an example, is similar to you, similar build, everything, right? She also struggles, and what she finds is that she does need to get a little bit more aggressive, and so you might need to have days where, you know, you're as low as 1,500 on rest days and things of that nature. Have you tried anything like that, Sharon, to sort of get the needle moving? Because I think what happens for a lot of people is they want to consistently stay at 2100 or 2400 or whatever. Um, right. She's saying, no, I haven't gone that low. Now, do realize what I'm saying is you go that low on a rest day and you only go that low occasionally. If you haven't read the Calorie Wave Method article, you, you, you really should, because I think it's going to be insightful. Are there any days that you feel uncomfortable? That would be a question I'd be interested to know. Or do you feel like eating 2,100 calories, you feel pretty good, you're pretty energetic, and you get great workouts? I'd be interested to hear what you say there.
I'm actually interested to know what her training consistency is, the frequency. Because my opinions are actually a little bit different. Because if she was coming from an overfed background and she reduced down to 2,100, if she actually had a DEXA scan and she lost muscle mass and gained body fat, I think
No.
she.
I'm sorry. That's all stayed the same. I mistook that. I was reading someone else's.
Okay.
Yeah.
Confusing me. You're confusing me. You know.
She hasn't lost fat. And this actually makes sense. I mean, honestly, she's saying she CrossFits 5 days a week. She feels great at 2,100. I got bad news for people, and we're not, you know, I mean, I know that people want to hear, you know, you can eat as, you know, at a decent calorie number, and you can feel great in the gym and all this other type of stuff, and you can also lose fat. And that is kind of true. You can maybe build a little lean tissue in that scenario. But if you want to lose fat, you're going to have to be a little uncomfortable on occasion. But the problem is that people get too uncomfortable too often. And so like when I said 1,500, I'm talking 1,500 maybe 1 day a week, try 2 days a week, things of that nature. Not going, you know, 1,500 as an average, because you'll ultimately end up in binge city, right? So what you want to do is you want to try and feel a little uncomfortable, nothing too bad, but you want to kind of get that average down. I think what you're seeing, Sharon, is that 2,100 is basically what your maintenance calories are in a cut, okay? Now, I think that it's very possible that your calorie numbers in expansion, when you're trying to expand your work capacity, are probably closer to 2,400, 2,500, but right now you're trying to tighten up your game a little bit. And what I'm saying is you can kind of speed up the process a little bit by having, you know, one, cutting your carbs on rest days to a reasonable level, doesn't have to be zero, and then that ultimately brings your like for instance, if you cut 100 grams of carbs on rest days, that's a 400 calorie deficit. That takes you from 2,100 to 1,700. That's pretty close to what I was talking about, right? So you might want to try 1,700 first by taking away 100 grams of carbs and kind of cycling that way. April, I mean, do you have any thoughts on what I'm saying? Because you said you had kind of a slight disagreement.
That's because you were confusing me with when you were reading the questions.
Yeah.
So.
See, that's why I can't multitask. Is any of this making sense, Sharon? Is this helpful? Because I genuinely think that you'll be able to move the needle a little bit. But you got to remember, the one thing that you guys have to understand is that when we're talking about cutting, you got to be focused on cutting. But when you're talking about expanding your work capacity, what you're really talking about is actually thriving, getting better at the gym, and ultimately it makes all these cutting cycles a lot easier. And so if you're always kind of hanging out at that 2,100 level and you never explore the 2,400, 2,500 level, you never really are able to make the 2,100, 1,700, and then maybe 1,500 occasionally work better. So read the Calorie Wave article. It'll give you some great ideas, and honestly, embrace the suck a little bit. It's one of the values of doing it for a short period of time, like 8 weeks, to where you go, okay, I'm going to try and lose 5 to 8 pounds. You know, I mean, having this conversation with my wife, you know, and just saying, hey, look, I know you have like some numbers in your head and things of this nature, but let's just kind of focus on March 5th, wherever you end up. We'll have found kind of a groove. I've sort of found my groove. I think my wife is still finding her groove. She definitely has had some successes this week, and you know, trying to figure out how to tweak a little things for her. But it's a process, and it's a different process for everybody. And so that's something I think everybody needs to explore a little bit more. And that's why we have the support in place to do that. Um, so Brian's asking a few questions, and I appreciate you doing that, but just stick with us, Brian, because we've got a few people ahead of you. Cynthia is saying, can you talk about nutritional timing? I do workouts 2 to 4 p.m., eat most carbs with dinner 6 p.m., and snack 8 p.m. Is this too late for my carbs with my workout times? Actually, Cynthia, that is about perfect. The only difference that I would say is maybe having a little bit of carbohydrates in your workouts. Part of the problem that you might be experiencing, though, is that your scenario sort of has you eating carbs like the majority of the day. And I don't think the timing of the carbohydrates probably near as important for you as the amount of carbohydrates. You want to have enough carbohydrates pre-workout to where your 2-hour workout feels better. And then you want to have some amount of starchy carbohydrates with your dinner, and then maybe snack before bed. But in terms of carbs being too late or things of that nature, I think kind of like the science that we rely on is that carbs at night tend to make you sleep better, sleep deeper, and as long as you're adequately fed, it's kind of like what I talked about earlier, you'll end up getting that, 8 hours sleep, 8.5 hours sleep. That kind of gives you that restorative type of value and builds new tissue and all this other type of stuff. So I wouldn't necessarily be super concerned related to the timing of the carbohydrate, but I would be a little bit more focused on the amount of carbohydrate. April, why don't you chime in? She had a few other follow-ups, and so
I agree. I think that quantity is more important than timing. Like what you said, around your workouts, if she's doing a 2-hour workout, I do think intra-workout carbs is very beneficial for something that long. And then the carbs with dinner, possibly before bed, does help with overall recovery, because the better you sleep, the better you're going to recover, which, you're going to, like what you said, grow new muscle tissue and perform better overall.
He says, yes, I have carbs pre and post workout. I went up 2 pounds fat and lost 2.5 pounds lean muscle on BIA device. No carbs at breakfast and to lunch. I think she's referring to like body impotence.
Yeah.
Is it like an in-body?
Those are like the handheld things, which are I think those are fairly inaccurate. The bioimpedance.
Well, it depends on the machine. I mean, some of the in-body stuff's pretty good.
Yeah, no, those are a little bit different, but I think the bioimpedance, you can basically, I think you can buy one off of Amazon. A lot of gyms have them,
Yeah. Cynthia, can you tell us what the BIA device is called or what brand it is? Because that would be helpful. Because I can tell you guys, like for instance, we put in-body machines in gyms, and they're like $8,000 machines, and then people will go, well, I have one at my home, and it's a $45, device. There's a difference. The variance is going to be much larger, and so I don't put a lot of stock in that type of stuff. It is what April was saying, handheld at my gym. Yeah, it really depends. I mean, unless I know the brand, unless I know how long it's been in the gym. If it's been in your gym for 5 years, what we normally recommend to the gyms that we work with, we work on a cycle of 2-year cycles to where we want them to cycle out that machine because they just sort of lose their relevancy over time. I wouldn't be overly concerned about that. But let's focus on a few things that would concern me. How has your weight been? Is it stable? Is it the same? When you first when you tested the first time compared to the second time, and then you said the second time is worse. Um, okay. Couple thoughts in terms of stable weight. Stable weight, you'll get weird readings. Okay. In general, if your weight's down, your body fat's going to be down. In general, if your weight's up, your body fat's going to be up. Are there outliers? Absolutely. There's certainly instances where if you're too aggressive on weight loss, let's say you lose 10 pounds in 10 days, you're going to see that you lost a certain amount of muscle under that scenario. Is it muscle? Is it water? Is it tissue? It's sort of, kind of a sticky widget there, or a sticky wicket. But in general, if your weight's the same, I don't know that I would necessarily be expecting a lot. And given that there is some degree of error with these types of things, I can tell you the other thing too. When we have somebody body fat test, we always tell them to test fasted in the morning. And the reason why you do that is you control all the factors. So for instance, if you tested at 8 a.m. one day and then you tested at 5 p.m. on another day, you're going to get a vastly different reading. And so some of your education as it relates to how you read this data is going to be somewhat important as well. So keep that in mind, because it's not always going to be something that, one, is going to be stable. Two, it sounds like maybe your situation might be a little unreliable, and there's just a lot of factors that go in with it. But you can't have huge expectations if you've sort of stayed weight stable. I think the goal would be, to maybe gain a little bit of tissue. I wouldn't say that you necessarily did or didn't based on the reading that you got. I would just call it somewhat inconclusive at this point, and kind of base some of your future decisions based on what I just said. So I'm going to try and move on, but if you have a follow-up question, Cynthia, go right ahead. I just don't know that we have enough information to really say, yep, pinpoint, that's exactly what happened in this scenario. So Steve was asking, have you ever used the Daily Burn app? I have not used the Daily Burn app. My understanding is that it has something related to workouts, and then also something related to nutrition advice. I don't know if they do calorie type of food logging type of stuff or what, but my suspicion is that it's pretty good, because I don't know that the advice would be up to the level of what we do, but in terms of like tracking and things of that nature, they're probably going off a pretty good API. Do you know what they use in terms of like nutrition tracking or some of the nutrition advice? I'd be interested to hear what you have to say in regards to that. In terms of the workouts, it's your standard, kind of working out, in your living room type stuff. It's kind of P90X-ish, things of this nature, maybe a few gym workouts, things of that nature, if you have the equipment available. So I'd be interested to hear a follow-up from you on that, Steve. Dan was saying, I log into the Science Lab form and I really don't know where to go to navigate anything that is useful to me. I don't know where to find anything. Well, the first thing that I would do, Dan, is to go to the TDE or macro section and then just get your total daily energy expenditure set. And what happens there is there will be a coach that will help you with what your calories and situation will be. So that's usually the place that I would have people start. The next place that's probably the second most popular is going to be having your food log checked. So if you're not logging your food, you don't know what your macros are, things of that nature, I would suggest that things are probably confusing. But if you can kind of, we're actually working on a system right now where we would have pods of moderators sort of working with people. But, you know, I think if you're sort of new to the forum idea or kind of new to the whole experience, if you just go to basically any forum or any thread and ask a coach for a little guidance, they will give it to you. That's the whole point of why we have people to do that. I mean, what would you say about that, April? I mean, April runs the forum, so I'd love to hear what she says.
No, I totally agree. I think it can be a little daunting if you're not used to navigating forums, because you basically sign in and you see all these different tabs and sections, and you're like, well, where the heck do I go? You click on one thing, it takes you somewhere else, and you see all these threads, and when you're not really familiar with it, like what you said, the best place to go is I think it's at the very top of the forum, the TDEE help. You basically click on that, and then up in the right hand corner, start a new thread, and you can actually post a question there, and you can actually continue. Once you start one, you can continue to reply and post questions on the same thread that you started. So whenever you log back into the forum, if you can't find your thread, all you have to do is click on your name, and it will actually show the post, and you can then click on that, and it will take you back to your thread. So there are threads in there that's got 600 posts on it, because people just ask the same different questions based off of their scenarios change, the training has changed. You don't necessarily have to start a new.
What Katie was talking about earlier, like as you evolve with each forum, you're going to ask different questions, and then the moderators will help you. I will say, if it's daunting in the beginning, don't be scared. That's what you paid for. You paid money to ask questions to professionals, so don't hesitate to do so. So Dan, if you have a follow-up to that, we had another person that asked a similar question, so I'm just going to answer it right now. Karen's asking, the Science Forum is an app. No, the Science Forum is a forum. That's basically the one-on-one coaching forum that you paid for. And so if you look in the documentation of when you initially signed up, it gives you instructions on how to sign up into the forums. The other thing that you could do is just basically go to Eat to Perform, scroll all the way down to the bottom where it says Science Lab Forum, and then just sign up for the Science Lab Forum. And as long as you bought Eat to Perform, which obviously you did because you're in this webinar, then they will approve you, and then you can kind of get on your way. Dan was asking, I'm just not sure if I'm entered or if I'm signed up right. I also downloaded the phone app. The phone app is helpful, but it's really not. I don't know if he's referring to the Tap Talk app that makes using the forum a little bit easier, or if he's talking about the Eat to Perform app. Yeah, the Tap Talk app is helpful. It's not that great on an iPhone, so just so you know. Okay, no, he's saying the ETP app. The ETP app is not going to be super helpful as it relates to the forums. I would say that if you, it sounds like you might not be in the forums, Dan. And if you're not in the forums, go to info@eat2perform. This is the same for you, Karen. Go to info@eat2perform. Or just go to the bottom of the page at Eat to Perform where it says Science Lab, and then if you're not signed up there, just sign in. It'll ask for your email, a few things. The moderators will approve you. I tried to do that, but I can't get the Reebok cover to go away.
If you actually, sorry to interrupt, rather than going to the bottom of the page, if you actually just go to www.forum.eatperform.com, it will take you directly to the forum site, and then it will give you the prompt to log in. And if you have not created an account, at that point you can create an account, and then it will tell you, it will come up with an error page because it's going to wait for you to get approved for your purchase to be checked at that point.
Okay, so Dan is saying that April and another moderator have been helpful, so he has had some interaction. Karen, what I would say with the Reebok cover to go away is basically just click outside of the cover and you'll be fine. If you can't click out of the cover, What was the URL? It's just
Forum dot
www.edenforum.com,
Yes.
and that will get you in. So we just addressed those questions. She said, "Thank you. I'm trying that now." Karen, I will say that it does take a little bit for a moderator to approve you, and so just be patient. It'll happen either tonight or tomorrow morning, and you'll be good to go. Okay, so we got 15 minutes left. Dan's saying, or how do I know how to check the challenge status? What I would do in terms of the challenge is just scroll down in the forums. We do need to move, April, I don't know if you can talk to Maggie about this, but we need to move the challenge stuff higher. I mean, there's no reason, and the challenge stuff is the most active part of the forum, and it's all the way at the bottom. That makes no sense at all. So we're going to try and get a little bit better for you guys, but right now, Dan, just scroll down to the bottom, and you should be ready to go. By the way, if you haven't, signed up for the Open, I got to tell you guys, we got like $5,000 worth of prizes, and I think right now we only have like 30, 40 people even signed up, and we're giving away prizes starting this week. So
Can I sign up? Am I eligible?
You are not eligible. Anyway, let's see. Linda was asking, I only just joined yesterday, so I haven't explored all the information for signing up yet, but my goal is not to lose weight, but to figure out what I need to eat to sustain the activity I do and make muscle gains. I do CrossFit 4 to 5 days a week per week in the evenings, and I run 4 times per week training for marathons. My question is how to eat the days I work out twice, early morning and evening before supper, and do you eat more on those days only? Yes, you would typically eat more on the days that you do more activity, and then you would reduce the amount of calories that you have on the other days. The one suggestion that I might make is that on the days that you CrossFit, and then on the days that you run. I think if you find that you're struggling to make gains or hold on to muscle or these types of things, it's because you're trying to serve two masters at once, and you're trying to get better at running, and you're trying to get better at maintaining lean muscle mass and maybe gaining a little bit of muscle. It's kind of hard to do that in both scenarios. So one thing I would ask you is, which one do you really want? Do you really want to get better at running, or do you really want to get better at strength training? Because what I can tell you typically happens for competitive athletes, triathletes, these types of people, we do have them kind of in off season get a little bit more serious about their CrossFit, get a little bit more serious about some weightlifting, things of that nature, not run so much, keeping running, of course, in their training. And then as they get closer to the season, they start to peak up for the running part. But kind of trying to, I can tell you I've done it before. I know a lot of people who've tried it before. It just doesn't work. It just doesn't work to try and just constantly kill yourself. And depending on your age, I'd be interested to know what your age is, because I think we could probably give you a good level of understanding as it relates to how to get better. I'm not even sure she's here, though, because actually she asked this question a while ago. She said, I run more May to September, then concentrate more on CrossFit October to April. I'm 50. I mean, for somebody that's 50, I don't know how long you've been doing this. I'd be interested to know that. I mean, maybe you have like this just huge work capacity. But if I were you coming into the running season, I'd focus a little bit more on your running and sort of tone down some of the CrossFit at this point, because you're really not going to be, well, gosh, it's February, right? So she's saying running 10 years, CrossFit 2 years. Yeah, let me just run through the season. She's saying CrossFit October to April. Yeah, I mean, I would say if you're looking to kind of peak up for the Open as an example, maybe even potentially make regionals. I don't know how good you are as an athlete. Um, I would probably decrease the running for a short while and maybe see how you do, in the Open. And if you're going to be a regionals competitor, at that point you would want to kind of slow down some of the running. But you kind of see what I'm saying, like how you just ramp up either CrossFit or ramp up your running. But if you do both of them, you're basically just going to kill yourself, you know. Um, and you'll get sick a lot. But certainly, I think your original question was fair. Do you add in more food? And that question is yes. One of the things that we're actually working on a running challenge right now, and one of the things that runners typically are not great about is actually matching up their level of intake related to their output. And so many runners actually end up really stressing out their system because they eat an inadequate amount of food for what they do. And so one of the things that we're going to try to do with that challenge probably coming up early summer is to get them kind of dialed in but also get better. And then we have one of the best people in terms of programming to do that. A gentleman named Alex Vieta is a guy that I'm going to tap for that and see if he's interested in kind of helping us. Um, any thoughts on that, April? Because we're sort of running out of time here.
No, I
Um,
agree. Obviously, when you're adding all the expenditures with running, you have to eat more. You have to eat, just the long distance running in general works off of your glycolytic system, so you're basically just burning energy, consistently. And I do agree with what you said. I tend to see a lot of people who they'll usually do two moderate runs during the week and then a long run on the weekends. And the long run generally on Saturdays is like 12 to 15 miles, and you
but
can easily burn 1,000 calories or more, with that. And I generally see, people,
up to 2,000.
exactly, and they're generally,
Depending on the
like,
year.
225 grams of carbs on my long run day, and I'm like, that's nowhere near the amount,
As an example to what she's saying, Linda, I didn't mean to cut you off there, April, but she's saying, I agree that is my struggle, eating enough. One of the things that you could add into the scenario would be Vitargo or some type of drinkable carbohydrate through the day or through your sessions. I would really kind of reserve that for the longer sessions, not necessarily kind of your shorter pacing type runs that are 3 to 5 miles, but anything longer, 10 to 15 miles, I would definitely have some level of drinkable carbohydrate. The other thing too is sort of on that rest days or active rest days, make sure that you're eating fat. I mean, I think one of the things that people don't realize is that when you're not eating enough, I think you'd be surprised, Linda, if you start adding in, some energy density through fats and maybe some more carbohydrates, kind of bringing in some supplements for drinkable carbohydrates. What I think you will see is you can actually get away with a lot more food, stay weight stable, have more energy, and actually run better as a result. Um, Most people that run, what ends up happening is they don't eat an adequate amount of food, and this is all pretty standard stuff for running, right? Is their joints start to hurt, their bones start to get brittle, and all these different types of things. A lot of that is from overuse, but a lot of it also is from under eating, and so when you get that adequate amount of food, you're eating an adequate amount of food for recovery, some of those little wears and tears and being sick and not sleeping well and all that other type of stuff starts to go away, and you end up running better as a result. So I hope that's helpful. I know you're new. I know this is all interesting, but stick with us, because one of the things that I really want to do in the next 6 months to a year is really focus on the running, because I think we've got real good answers for runners, and runners don't know that yet. And I think that that's going to be a big addition to us, and we're going to bring on staff to kind of help us with that. So um, April's like, yeah, but I'm not going to be running. So
I was actually
um,
When you were saying that, I was actually thinking that we should both start running more. Or I should start running in general, and you should run more.
I run. That's the funniest thing. Like I write things about running, and I think people think that I don't run. I can walk out the house right now and run a half marathon. So I run. I typically only run when chased. That's my big joke. But no, I actually do like running, and especially in Minnesota in the spring when it starts to warm up and things of this nature. You've kind of been cooped up in your basement for 6 months. It's really nice to get out there and run. And I actually enjoy running. I'm not great at it, but I do enjoy it. I like it's almost meditational for me. Um, Okay, so Brian's asked a couple questions, and we've taken forever to get to them. And I'm just trying to see, but I think that's probably going to be what we end on. Brian's saying, okay, wow. Let's see. Paul, if I'm understanding correctly, you recommend a program that mirrors what I have traditionally followed as a fitness competitor, men's physique. Yeah, maybe. I think physique kind of gets a little low. But a lot of the principles of what we're talking about are based on, some bodybuilding stuff and things of this nature. The one criticism I would have of physique and bodybuilding is that they don't push the top end near as much as we suggest, and so maybe that'll be helpful as you know as we talk. This model is that a competitor diets, cuts for a set period of time before a show with the goal of an end date combined with body fat percentage. After this cutting period, the athlete then on diets to expand their work and caloric capacity while maintaining or increasing lean muscle mass. Yeah, that's true. Kind of sounds a little bit like you've been listening to Lane Norton. We're a big fan of what he does, and so as a physique competitor, you probably are familiar with what he does. Let's see. Example, my maintained caloric intake is 2,800 to 3,000 at 195 pounds. That would be an example of what I'm talking about. At 2,800, 3,000 calories at 195 pounds, that's what I eat at 170 pounds, and I'm 5'8". And so what I would suggest to you is really trying to push that number, because what happens with a lot of people that come from like physique background or if it fits your macros or things of this nature, what ends up happening is they kind of set their own scenario. So you set your maintenance calories at 2,800, 3,000 calories. Who's to say that you wouldn't build more tissue at 3,500 calories, that your work capacity wouldn't go up, that you wouldn't be able to get away with, more and cooler stuff, and ultimately building more tissue as a result. When I cut, I drop caloric intake to 2,000, 2,200 calories on an average daily. Once again, I'm not a huge fan of daily average. I tend to waive it a little bit more, because what I like to do is have the athletes focus a little bit more on a higher caloric standpoint. But I do kind of like where you're going with it from a standpoint of average. I do like that, but we go up a little bit higher. We use a little bit more carb cycling on rest days and even some active rest days. Some days lower, some higher, so that I can maintain intensity, but as you said, embrace the suck. Yeah, the problem with embracing the suck, especially as it relates to physique competitors and bodybuilders, is they tend to embrace the suck too long, right? So they're constantly in these cutting, dieting cycles, and I think that, and it's not just my opinion, it's the opinion of a lot of people that are actually in the sport, is that if people's cycles were longer, that as a physique competitor, if you were to take 2 years as an example, expanding that work capacity, maybe getting to that 3,500, 3,800 calorie standpoint, maybe getting your weight up 10 to 15 pounds, building more lean tissue as a result, now all of a sudden your cut's easier, now all of a sudden your physique looks better in competitions and things of that nature. So in general, you have a much higher understanding than the good majority of people, but I think there are some things that we would be able to help you with as it relates to the things that you do. And so it's kind of cool to have you around, that's for sure. And it'll be interesting to have you part of the community and kind of sharing what your experience has been, because the one thing that people don't realize is that if you've been dieting for years, something of that nature, like you and Brian, he's very intelligent about it, but there's been some other people that maybe have done it, but they haven't put all the pieces together. Actually, we do have one other question that I need to answer, but they haven't put all the pieces together. They did learn some things in that process, and so it's just kind of putting all the pieces together. Like in Brian's case, his pieces might be trying to figure out how not to restrict his top end. And actually, I think that's a lot of people's thing, is that they artificially decrease their top end, and they need to constantly be pushing that. And that's sort of what we talked about early on with Andy's question. So we did have one other question that came in, and I kind of missed it there. Ania was asking, I've been doing ETP since January 1st. Came from a high carb, low protein, normal fat, which is a guesstimate for the last 6 months before ETP. Following ETP makes me very aware of food intake and physical activity, which is great. What I noticed in the last couple of weeks, especially last week, that I feel less strong. I'm missing that kick that I felt before. I seem to be losing some inches and staying the same weight. Was wondering, what is your opinion on that? I did have the monthly friend and come visit me this weekend, so I was wondering if that could affect it. It definitely affects it. It's definitely a big thing. The thing that I always say to people in that situation, and actually maybe April would have a little bit more insight, obviously, but stick with the plan. Trust the process, and just keep doing what you need to do, because ultimately you're going to get some false signals. And it sounds like things are kind of going good for you. The one thing that I would say, though, is if you're sort of missing out on that, like next level stuff that you kind of got at first and you're not getting right now, that means it's kind of normal at this point for you, which is actually a good thing. And so picking up a few tips here and there from the moderators would probably be something that I would recommend. Any thoughts on menstrual cycles and things like that?
It absolutely is a huge factor. All women are different, but the hormonal cycles and stuff. We have this topic on the forum daily, and me included. A couple of days before my cycle begins, I'll have every single time, like clockwork, I have like the worst ever day in the gym where I barely pick up anything, and I'm like, what the heck, and then bam, and then I'm like, duh, but generally whenever the monthly cycle comes around, obviously your energy is going to be lacking. Some of the natural sources is increasing your food increasing food that has higher levels of iron, and also B vitamins does help with your energy levels. So that might actually make a big difference.
She was also saying, why do others on the force say that coming back after a rest day you do not feel as strong? Well, you got to remember that the basic protocol of Eat to Perform is that on rest days you're going to be eating lower, and typically eating lower carbohydrates, so that can result in a little bit of fatigue. The thing that I would suggest that you play with, though, is to have maybe a little bit more carbohydrate later in the evening, or not get so aggressive with your calories on that day. I think that that's what happens with a lot of people. They get too aggressive on rest days, and it carries over to their workout days. And it sort of depends. Like we were talking with Brian, and I was talking a little bit earlier. If you're cutting, maybe you have to embrace the suck for a little bit. But the reality is you shouldn't be cutting the majority of the time. And so if you're not cutting the majority of the time, your rest days you shouldn't dramatically dig into your workout days. At that point, it's just kind of like finding a healthy balance. And if it is, you're just getting too aggressive on rest days is the point. Um, I'm gonna try and finish up because, like I said, I've got an appointment at the Apple Store at 8:40, so I got to get moving here. Leif is saying, just want to say thank you guys for all the help. Things feel like they're starting to fall in place. Awesome, super. Okay, you guys. Well, like I said, I got to get out of here. I appreciate everybody being here. This is actually one of the best classes I think we've ever had. I really thought that everybody asked great questions, and you know, it was just awesome to be able to help you guys. And you know, I have to say, you know, just to get a little sappy, you know, no matter how bad my day is, being able to do this on Monday nights, I really do enjoy it. It's sort of like a respite for me, and it's something that I really enjoy helping people with. And I don't get to do it near as much as I'd like to as part of each performance. So I appreciate you guys hanging around, listen to us, and you know, hopefully, if you're around and can be a part of the forums as much as you can, that would be awesome. So I appreciate everybody being here. April, do you want to say goodbye?
Good night, everybody.
See you guys later, and thanks for showing up. Bye-bye.